gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The show starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Invest in Yourself, the podcast series. I am, of course, your host with the most Feel Better. I am messing up my intro. Good thing this isn't live, and I can always edit that out, but I probably will leave it in for authenticity because you got to preach what you have to follow what you preach. But ladies and gentlemen, of course, you know I am Phil Better, the podcast mogul. I'm here to help you grow your podcast by interviewing the podcasters around the world who are still podcasting, who are actively in the world and are being awesome. Today, I am happy to have the host of the Fascination Street Podcast, Mr. Steve Owens himself. Steve, thank you so much for being on the show.
What is up, Phil?
I'm doing good. How are you? I'm sorry. I had an ice cap. So I'm Canadian. You probably didn't know this, but my audience is really well aware that I'm a Canadian, and we have something called an ice cap, and it's pretty much just coffee and sugar mixed in together, frozen, because we live in a frozen hellscape in Canada, you know. So it's a lot of sugar and caffeine.
Can I have one, please? That sounds amazing.
It is delicious. They came out with it, and I've been addictive, and it's really bad because it's not good for you at all, obviously. And I'm trying.
Oh, it sounds like it's the diabetes in a cup.
Yeah, it's. I'm always expecting,
delicious.
the diabetes guy to come out. Diabetes, just every time I order one. But Steve, it's not. The show is not about me and my ice cap addiction. That's probably another podcast that's going to come down the line. But Steve, this is about you and your show. So please introduce yourself to my audience. Let us know who is Steve Owens and what the hell is the Fascination Street Podcast.
Well, my name is Steve Owens. I am old as dirt, and well, according to my kids, I started listening to podcasting like back in I was like 08 or 09 or something. I was working at a bank, and I was behind the scenes, so I could listen to whatever I want while I did all my button pushing and whatnot. And so I stumbled upon podcasting on iTunes, and I just fell in love with it. And so I listened to it for over a decade, I guess right at a decade, maybe a little less, before I decided, hey man, that's something I want to do. And so I decided to start Fascination Street Podcast because I believe that everybody has a story, and I'm fascinated to hear these stories. And the genesis was that my wife was working out of town a lot, and so whenever I would fly to go be with her or visit her or whatever, invariably I would sit next to somebody on a plane and just get to chatting with them, and their story would just blow me away. I would sit next to a guy who invented some unique form of plastic, which who cares, except that those things make all of our things. Or
Yeah.
I would sit next to somebody who traveled around the world opening paint stores. And I'm like, what the fuck? What is that? Like, what does that even mean? And so
I can't believe that's actually a job.
Oh, it's a job, dude. It's a job. And it's so funny because the guy whose job that was, he talked about it like every store was going to be the one he hung himself at because he hated it so much.
I can fully imagine, because it's like, this is your job day in and day out. To us, it sounds fascinating. To him, it's like, it's a copy paste, man. It's copy paste day in and day out for me. Like, we can understand, like, if I did it once, I'd be like, okay, this is cool. Never again. Because it does sound extremely boring because you're dealing with the same type of people every single day.
Yeah, doing the exact same tasks every single day, the same hurdles every single day. He described it as quite literally watching paint dry.
And he can get away with that joke because he has to watch paint dry. So your why? So you've listened to all these things. You would travel to meet your wife. Sorry, I cut you off fully. You're in the middle of your origin story. I'm like, I'm your villain story. Cutting you off. So yeah, you're traveling, listening to these podcasts, but you're also talking to these amazing people.
Yeah, and I had always, for years and years and years, I was so impressed by podcasts and just the free flowing creativity of how podcasts worked. And you didn't have to have a studio behind you. You didn't have to have a radio station. You could just be some idiot with a microphone, and that's all you needed.
Like me.
And so, exactly, I was thinking of you when I said
I
it.
know. I felt it. I felt it, Steve.
And so I got to thinking, man, I would love to have a podcast, except that I don't have anything to say.
Mhm.
I don't tell stories. I don't have a particular point of view that's like, oh, I'm all politics or I'm all science or whatever. I'm all finance. I didn't have any particular point of view, and I didn't feel like I had a story to tell. But what I did have was the curiosity to hear about other people's stories. And so I decided in 2017 to make an interview podcast. And that is what Fascination Street Podcast is. I am more than 5.5 years into it. I have 330 listenable episodes currently. It comes out weekly every Monday. I have never once missed a Monday in all these years. I'm very proud of that.
That's awesome.
And it it started as just talking to regular ordinary people to get to know them, but the more successful I became, the more doors opened to me, and I have had some of the most amazing guests, people who have won the Masters, that golf tournament, the Masters, a few times. I have had people who won the Indianapolis Grand Prix and won the Formula One championships. I've had directors of multi-million dollar movies and actors and musicians who have written some of the songs that everybody grows up with, and they're iconic. I mean, I've had so many people, and it's all because I'm so curious, and then and doors open when you're curious, I guess.
Oh yeah, no, there certainly are. Because when you're curious, you have zero fear of asking someone, "Hey, do you want to talk to me?" And if they say no, you're like, "Okay, whatever, it's your loss." Move on to the next thing. And then everybody sees you're getting these like $1 million directors, this and that, and then they're like, "I want to be part of that." So they reach out to you to get onto the show, and then it's like, "Holy shit, these big time people are reaching out to me. What the hell?"
It's amazing. I had a guy on, God, it's probably been over a year ago or whatever. And that's one of the things that I love about podcasting is not that I just get to fulfill my curiosity or get to learn about all these different things and these neat people, but also the relationships that I get to build, because a lot of these guests I'm still friendly with. Some of them I'm best friends with. And an example is about a year ago, I interviewed a guy who was a writer for Saturday Night Live. He was a writer on that show for like a decade. And I interviewed him, and he was super cool. He had come into San Antonio because he was executive producing some show, and he was gracious enough to sit down with me, and we sat down and talked for an hour. And that was a year ago, and the show came out and everything was great. Well, I hadn't talked to him in a year, and then, 3 weeks ago, I get an email from him, and he says, "Hey, I'm gonna be back in San Antonio in a couple of weeks. I'm gonna be executive producing this, live variety show to celebrate the veterans of America on Veterans Day, and I would love it if you and your wife and some of your friends would come to the show as my guests." And I was just like, "Do you have the right? Like, are you sure? Like,
It's so weird,
me?"
right?
I just love it, and some of the most amazing people are not the way that I expected them to be. Like some guy who's a big fancy comedian, television show writer who wrote on SNL for a decade. I thought he was going to be a dick, but he is the sweetest, nicest, most genuine guy. And that is one of my favorite things about learning about all these people, is how sweet and genuine some, not all, but how sweet and genuine some of these people have been and can be. And like I said, the relationships, just amazing.
It is. It's and that's what I love about interview podcasts, because you get to create that connection super quick, especially when you're talking with someone who has the same passion as you. Like when I do this show, I love interviewing like more veteran, I would say, podcaster, someone like yourself who's been in the game for a long term, because you love the craft of it. We can talk about like how it creates the relationships, how, you know, the amazing experiences that can come from it. Like you said, like you and your friends are now guests at this amazing thing, and now you look like a superstar, and you're like, nah, man, I'm just this. You're just staying humble, because you know it's when you stay humble, that's when you get to the great levels.
I get to look like a pimp, not only to my wife, but to these friends of ours who
Yeah.
live across the street. And like I was even like I even reached back out and I was like, oh dude, this is gonna be so much fun. Is there gonna be, because I don't know how busy this guy is gonna be. He's
Yeah.
producing a variety show.
Yeah.
And I said, is there gonna be sort of a break in the action? Like, is there gonna be a chance where I'm gonna get to, introduce you to my wife and my friends and feel like a big shot and all that? And he was like, you know what? You guys are invited to the after party with all of the comedians and the actors I'm like, what are you talking? Who
Jesus.
are you? Who am I?
How did I get here?
But you know what it does? And this is going to be the first of probably many, many terrible jokes. But what it does is it makes me feel better about my life and who I am and who I have become.
Hold on. I have an applause button here. If I have a roadcaster, gotta use it right. It has sound buttons. But
Yeah, you do. You better use it.
It's amazing. But yeah, it is true. Like you get these experiences that, like, even yourself, you pinch yourself, you're like, this is how it works. Like when your friend, wow, like it's astronomical. The amounts. Like I look at one of my students, he teaches at a school, and they have a podcast, TWS Sports Podcast, amazing podcast, where they interview sports legends of England and some fairly other ones. And it reminds
Did
me
you
of
say
this.
TWSS? Like that's what she said?
No, it's it's TWS Sports Podcast. The TWS is the name of the school.
All right. Okay. Thank God.
Yeah, it's not.
And the reason that I said that is because one of the first podcasts that I listened to all the way back in the day was a podcast called TWSS, and it was called That's What She Said, and it was based on The Office. And so every whatever day that show came out, like Wednesday or Thursday, whatever it was, they would do
A recap.
they do a recap. So it was a recap show that was like, four days after the thing came out. And that was back when the show was on. And it was just one of the things one of the many, many reasons I fell in love with podcasting. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's fine.
Your
It's a
friends
great...
That's What She Said sports school podcasting
Yes.
show. Go ahead.
Anyways, and they had interviewed one of the presidents of Disneyland, or the Disney resorts. So under the Disney conglomerate, the one that he was the president of the resorts. And it reminds me, he traveled over to Disney Florida with his family, and he's like, hey, I'm going to be in Florida. And they got like a VIP kind of treatment because of it. And it's like, and he's like, holy, like he was also amazed too. Like he now looks like a big shot in front of his wife and has this great memory with him and his daughter and his wife. Well, like same thing with you're going to look like a big shot in front of your family. Like you don't even tell them like, yeah, we're going to the after party. You just show up and be like, oh yeah, by the way, we're going to the after party.
Yeah. Oh, you guys didn't want to leave yet, right? Because we're going to party like Donkey Kong. Are y'all ready? Let's go.
Yeah. So that's one of the big things that's happened to you on your podcast. You must have some crazy memories. Like
I have so many. Do you know who Adam Carolla is?
Yes, I do know who Adam Carolla is.
So he has a podcast, right?
Yes.
Sure. Well, on my first trip to California, which was when I started my podcast, I had the idea, I should start a podcast, blah, blah, blah. But I was a little sort of timid about when I should pull the trigger, how I should get started, whatever. But through podcasting, I had made a friend in Hollywood who was an actor who had been acting since he was, I think, 2 years old. And at this time he was like 55 or something. And we had, met and become friends sort of through podcasting, but our relationship was really on the phone and, through email and stuff like that. And so I had the opportunity to go to Los Angeles and actually physically meet this guy. Right. And I was very excited because we had been talking, we're just chatting on the phone, super cool for, I don't know, a year and a half or something. And I was going to get to go to LA. I was going to finally meet this dude in person. He was so cool. He picked me up from the airport, which is not something anybody ever does in Los Angeles. Because of the airport situation in Los Angeles sucks.
It's horrible. Yeah, I know.
But so because I had made some other friends sort of through podcasting and social media and things, I decided, oh, okay, so this was going to be a great opportunity for me to get started. So I'll go to Los Angeles. I'll record episodes with all of these people that I had made inroads with, and then that'll give me a good bank of shows to get started with, because one of my fears was that I would get started and I'd put out 3 shows and then I wouldn't have a 5th show or a 4th show or something, right? So I didn't want to do that. So what I did was I made like this little, it was really cool. I call it my travel kit. So it's
Yeah.
really just a cell phone, an adapter, and 2 lavalier mics, right?
Yeah.
And that allows you to just talk to anybody anytime, all the time. And it fits in your pocket, so it doesn't take up a bunch of space. So I interviewed a bunch of people, and that trip, I think I was there for 4 days. And out of that 4 days, I got my first 12 shows.
Jesus.
But here's the best part. One of those people, well, a few of those people worked at the Adam Carolla show for Adam Carolla.
Holy shit.
Not only did I get to interview a bunch of the people who worked for Adam Carolla, producers, and in some cases on-air talent, I got to do it sitting in his chair in his studio. So like, I think as of right now, I think 4 or 5 of my shows, Fascination Street Podcast, have been recorded with me sitting in Adam's chair in his studio in Glendale, California. Exactly.
Jesus. For people who don't know what just happened, they're listening to the audio version because they're Puritans. I just threw up my hands and threw down my pen because that's insane. That's insane.
It is so crazy. And that didn't stop. I've continued to have a relationship with the Adam Carolla staff and crew. Adam's been on my show. Dr. Drew's been on my show. Like they are an amazing group of people over there. I can never, ever, ever thank them enough. They're just the coolest people ever. And that's only just one of my cool stories. Another one is that famous actor that I was talking about that I had met and, went out there to be, he let me stay with him for the first 2 days. He picked me up from the airport and I stayed with him for 2 days. And then we just hung out and did all kinds of crazy shit. And a few years later, he was throwing, well, actually, this is crazy. So that first visit when I was there and I interviewed him and a bunch of other people, he said, who you should interview before you leave is my dad. My dad has been an actor for 65 years and has been in over 1,000 TV and film things. And I said, well, do you know his agent? how can I reach out to
how can we do
publicist? Who's his publicist? And he goes, well,
dealing with his son,
let's
go through the proper process. Yeah, okay.
Exactly. And so the dad was out of town at the time. We were actually standing in the dad's house when my friend told me that, because dad was out of town. And I said, well, when's he coming back? And he goes, well, he's coming back on Saturday, kind of late. And I said, well, I'm leaving on Sunday kind of late. I don't know if there's going to be time or if he's going to be jet lagged. I mean, he's an older guy. I don't want to impose on this guy. And he goes, no, I'll get it all worked out. So he did get it all worked out. And I ended up interviewing this man who had raised 2 hugely successful actor children and had an amazing 60-year career by himself. And I got to interview him sitting at his kitchen table. I talked to him for 2 hours. I was so grateful. And this guy was amazing. And then I flew home. And then before I even had a chance to release that episode, because I edit the hell out of all my episodes, before I even had a chance to release that episode, that man died.
Oh my God.
And then I had a conundrum. Do I even release that episode? Would that seem tacky or gauche? Do I even release it? And so I had to talk to the son, who, I'm still really good friends with. And he said, can I hear it first? And I was like, absolutely.
Yeah, of course.
So I sent it to him and he called me crying and he said, this is the last interview that my dad ever did, the last long form. He basically, what had happened is he got sick on the set of his last film and then died a couple of weeks later. So this was the last long form interview that I did with that anybody did with his dad. And he cried and he said, absolutely, release it. You have my blessing. Is it okay if I send it to my brother, who's a bigger name, who people would know? And I said, absolutely, go ahead. Well, I did, and it was amazing. But fast forward to this father's memorial service. I was invited. Oh, so I flew to Los Angeles. This memorial service was held at the Warner Brothers Studios in a I don't know, a projection room, whatever, a movie room, whatever the hell they're called, stadium seating, big screen, the whole thing. It was one of the most amazing times of my life, and I know that it came on the back of this great man passing away, but that experience for me, I'll never be able to replace it. Nor would I want to, but because of that, I mean, that man affected so many people. I got to meet so many amazing people I never thought. I got to meet the Fonz at that event. I got to meet Olaf from
The Frozen movies.
Thank you. Yes, I got to meet that guy. I mean, I got to meet so many people, and the family is 3 generations of wildly famous actors, and I got to meet all of them. And there was a whole family only dinner afterwards that I got to be a part of. Like, it was just the wildest, most crazy. I just, and some of those people, besides the son who I'm still friends with, really good friends with, I got to meet so many people at that thing that I'm friends with some of those other people still today. And they have been on my show multiple times, some of them. And it's just all of these experiences have just been amazing. And then that same guy, that same friend, a couple years later, he had his 60th birthday party. Me and my wife went to his 60th birthday party. Like what is happening to my life? I don't understand me.
If your friends don't understand how big of a celebrity you are, because you're look, I'm gonna brass tacks here, man. Like brass tacks. Like, how does people not know how great you are? Like, the reason you get these amazing interviews and these amazing events is because of your curiosity. You're genuinely curious about people, and you don't treat them any differently. You know, like, hey, you're a person. I want to learn about you. Tell me about your life, because it must have been interesting, and you just delve into it, and that's a great thing because people love that.
One of the things that I do when I interview somebody is I don't act like I know anything about them. I mean, there might be a few things that I'll say, oh, well, tell me about this, or I heard about that, or, you know, there's a project they're promoting, tell me about that. But for the most part, when I'm asking people to tell me about their lives, I didn't grow up with them. I didn't go to school with them. I didn't go to work with them. I don't know them. And so I interrupt them constantly. You know, like, oh, well, I grew up in Edmonton, Alberta. Oh, well, what was that like? I hear that they had they got the Oilers over there. Like, tell me about growing up in Edmonton. And we'll just go off on these little weird tangents. And all of these are pieces that help turn that person into who they are. And so I just want to it's sort of like a Rubik's Cube that I'm trying to twist up while I'm talking to somebody. And it just goes everywhere off the rails all the time. But what I don't do is act like I know anything about what they're talking about. You could be telling me about the hat that you're wearing and that you bought it at a coffee shop. And instead of me going, yeah, I bought a hat at a coffee shop before, and then moving on to something else, oh, well, tell me why you go to that coffee shop. Do they make snow caps?
No, it's ice caps. Ice caps. There's no snow caps.
Snow caps is that stupid little candy you buy at the movie theater.
Okay, we don't have them in Canada. Sorry.
Oh, good, because they're stupid.
We have enough snow. We don't need to be reminded about the snow. But
damn, ice caps.
They're great. They're great. Don't worry, you'll get it. Tim Hortons ice caps.
Oh, Tiho. Well, I didn't know it was Tiho's. Now I'm gonna go get one. I mean, not in Texas, but I'll go find one.
You'll find one. I think they're a lot by like New York. You have to go up to the Yanks.
Yeah, they got some like in Illinois and Indiana and stuff like that too. Yeah, I've been there. I've been to Canada once.
Ooh,
and
where in Canada?
I have to say it right. Toronto.
Oh, Toronto.
No, Toronto. I'm telling you, I'm correcting you.
I know you are. I wanted to see how I could do it. I hate Toronto.
Oh, sweet.
I'm not that I hate it. I'm a Montrealer, so there's already this like you're born hating Toronto just because it's Toronto.
Well,
There's no
I hate Toronto because um uh Kawhi Leonard left the Spurs and then won a championship with Toronto. So
fair.
eat
Fair.
a bag of dicks, Toronto.
What brought you up to Toronto?
My wife had a work convention thing and she was like, "Hey, do you want to go?" And I was like, yes, please. I had never been
Free
to
trip?
Canada. So
Yes.
I was like, hell yeah. And we did the Canada side of the
Niagara
the
Falls.
that. And
The good
we
side.
went yeah, that. And then we went on the whatever, the Maiden of the Mist or whatever the hell
Yeah.
it's called, and it was glorious. We had interesting food, and there is a lot more um a bigger Asian population in Toronto than I thought there would be. I will say that.
Yes. Because it's a
Great
hub.
food though.
Yeah, amazing food. It's a hub of it's a hub of multiculturalism because there is no real Toronto. Like, there's no people like people say I'm born in Toronto. They're like born outside of Toronto. They're not born in the city center, pretty much. So you won't find true. Like it's really weird. But everybody goes there because that's the where their center of commerce is, pretty much in Canada. It's the New York Stock Exchange, kind of like that's the Toronto Stock Exchange. That's all we have. We used to have a Montreal one, but we won't go into that. That's Canadian politics, and that's not interesting at all.
Or fascinating. And
It's very true.
I went to my only Major League Baseball game there. I got to see the Toronto Blue Jays. I don't even remember who they played. I had such a good time. It was fun.
Oh yeah, no. So
And
yeah,
it was for my birthday, so even better. I
awesome.
win. My life is
So, yeah, I'm very jealous of your life right now.
Me too.
All right, I do. What is your tip for because you've been in it for a long term? Like, this is 5 years you've been podcasting, over 300 episodes, meeting amazing people. What's your tip for people who are just starting out? Because we know there's pod fade after like 10 episodes. Now it may be a bit longer, but what is your secret? Like, what is your tip to people staying in the long game?
Consistency. Consistency, I think, is the number one thing that you have to keep in mind before you even start your podcast. If you have a great idea for a podcast and you record an episode, you don't release that episode until you have another one ready to go. And I think that what happens a lot, and I see it all the time, is you'll find a podcast that you like and you'll subscribe to it and you'll be like, what, when does this thing come out? Like there was a podcast that I was interviewed on, and I was looking at the release dates on his podcast or his episodes, and he releases one on Wednesday, he releases one on Friday, he'll take 2 weeks off, he'll release one on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and then he'll take a month off. And then I'm just like, that doesn't work. And here's why: because whether it's TV or a radio or a podcast or even hanging out with your friends, if your friends or whoever, if your audience doesn't know when you're going to be there or if you're coming back, well, then they're not going to have that faith in you. And so the way I say it is, if your audience can't depend on you, why should you depend on them? Why are they going to be there if they don't know when you're going to be there?
Mm-hmm.
So consistency. Like I said, before I even released my first episode, I had recorded 12. I had only edited like 3, but since it was a weekly podcast, I had enough to keep going. But my number one is consistency. Don't release don't release the first one until the second one's ready to go and you're working on the third one at least.
I love that. That's friggin' golden advice to anybody.
All that other stuff doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you have the best microphone, the shittiest microphone. It doesn't matter if you have great guests, shitty guests. It doesn't matter if your audio quality sounds like ass, because everything is going to change as the show morphs into what it is. When I started, my show wasn't about famous people. It's about regular everyday people. And now it's both. I didn't have the greatest microphone. I just had whatever I could find or whatever I could afford. People do it off of their phone until they get a better microphone, and all of that is fine, because
just start.
What they care. Yeah, just start. Like I think it was your most recent guest. That was his tip, was just start. What are you waiting for? Just start. All that other stuff is going to change. And as long as you're consistent and you either know what you're talking about or you present a decent show, they're not going to care about the audio quality at first. I mean, if they have to put up with some crazy shit with the audio quality, then it's going to be a problem eventually. But most people are very, very forgiving
Yeah.
when it comes to poor audio quality, but they're not forgiving about their time and their calendar and where the hell are you?
Yeah, if like I love what you said, the consistency, because and like it doesn't matter who you interview, what you interview about, as long as you're consistently releasing episodes for the one person. Doesn't matter if it's your listen have one listener or 1,000 listeners. That one listener, as long as you're putting out for them, they'll continue to download your episodes and continue to listen to you. And that's what you're doing it for. It's that one ideal listener. That's something that I talk about. But yes, the consistency is key. I love your advice. Don't release an episode until you have the next one recorded and you're working on the third one, so the following one, so that you're always ready to release an episode. I think that's a genius thing. I record like 20 in a row. Like I spend 2 days recording for 3 different podcasts. That's all I do. My days are just recording for 2 days a week, and I get a dozen or so episodes out of that, and then I just edit the hell out of them, and then they're released, and I have a bit of a breathing room. But I'm continually recording because I want to make sure that the episodes keep flowing out of me, and there's nothing stopping. So if I do get sick for a week, I can cancel everything and I'm still good because there's episodes until like next month.
That's right. You got to look at it like you just keep shoveling coal into that locomotive engine.
Yeah.
Just keep doing it.
Sometimes you can take sometimes you can take a month off and you're good, but because the next 2 months are full of episodes, but you still pump out trying to get people to come on your show if you're a guest or you have content that come up. Steve, we're coming to the end, not me coming to the end, but we're coming to the end of the episode. We're a little bit over, but that's okay because you're a great guest and I love it. I'm going to ask you my spark question. This one's actually really good for I think it's a great one for you, especially what you just said. But what is something you've done that your future self will thank you for?
Well, one of the things that I've done that my future self will thank me for is that I put a lot of episodes in the bank. Right now, if I was to interview somebody, that episode would not come out until next year. Maybe a couple of months into the year. I am so far ahead that my future self looks back and says, thank you for taking some of that pressure off of me, because I've been behind the 8 ball where, it's Friday and I'm not done with Monday's episode. And then everything comes to a stop and I have to make some sacrifices and stay up some late hours to make sure it gets done. And so when I'm in those situations, I look back at my past self and say, what the hell is wrong with you, man? Why did you put me in this spot? So that's what I think my future self would thank me for.
There we go. All right, Steve, the floor is yours. Tell us where we can find you, follow you, and support you.
Fascination Street Podcast can be found everywhere, including Spotify, iHeart, and Apple Podcast app, as well as fascinationstreetpod.com. It comes out every Monday. Currently, there's 330 episodes available. Everybody from Mario Andretti to Adam Carolla, Dr. Drew, Paul Feig, Clint Howard, Gary Player. The list goes on and on. I couldn't even... Carol Baskin. Come on now. I even had an astronaut on there. I mean, there's something for everybody. Everything is not for everybody, but there's definitely something for everybody. Follow the show on Twitter at Fascination STPD, Instagram at Fascination Street Pod. There's a Facebook page, Fascination Street Podcast, TikTok at Fascination Street Pod. And if you even know what Vero is, you can find me there at Fascination Street Pod as well.
That is amazing, sir. Thank you so much.
Steve, you are most welcome. And hold on now. Hold on
sorry,
now.
I apologize.
Phil, I appreciate you. Thank you for having me on your show. I've listened to a few episodes of your show. I love what you're doing, and I encourage you to keep it up. I love the diverse guests that you have on, and because of the diversity of the guests, the diversity of the subject matter. And I just really enjoyed your show. I'm going to listen to your other shows. You have a whole lot of them.
I have a few shows. Yeah.
But I did listen to a few episodes of Invest in Yourself, and I was very impressed. Good job. Keep
Wait,
it
wait, hold on, because there's two Invest in Yourself. We have the podcast series one and the digital entrepreneur. I'm guessing you're listening to the podcast series because you went through the podcast series funnel, or did you go through the entrepreneur funnel?
Well, let's find out, because it is podcast series. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Podcast series.
Yeah. Okay,
Yes.
good. Yeah. I love the podcast series because I love listening to podcasts. So now that trying to find the podcast that is worthwhile to listen to, like you because it's like you said, it's a valuable time, takes time, it's out of my time. So being able to interview some of the podcasters like I have and learn about their show, I'm like, okay, I like the way this podcaster talks. Like I love the communication we've had, Steve. Like I've listened to your episodes and I friggin' love them. But so I knew going into the conversation with you, it was going to be great. Sometimes it's like you listen to the episode, you're like, I don't know. And then you talk with the guest and you're like, oh no, I just have to give it a few more episodes and then you'll find out, because you get that great connection with the guest. But also I love providing this to my listeners. They can find new shows. Like now that my main thing is now to go back to your first 12 and try and find the episode of the famous person you're talking about, because I want to hear this. I want to hear who it was and like how that affected the rest of your episodes, because it was, like you said, it's a pivotal moment in your podcasting career.
And it happened so early.
Yeah, that's what makes it even better.
I think so.
Oh, well, interesting. More interesting.
No, better. No, we're on the Feel Better show.
Yeah, we're on the Feel Better, so you'll definitely feel better.
But also, real quick, I just wanted to give out a second tip.
Yeah.
And that second tip is, in order to grow your audience, be a guest on podcasts, because you alluded to it earlier, and it made me remember that every podcast that I've ever listened to or sought out was because I heard that person on a podcast. And so, like you said, you love doing the podcast series because you love podcasts. Well, the people who listen to podcasts, guess what? They listen to podcasts. And so they're going to find the other new podcasts by listening to the So just be interviewed, be on as many podcasts as you can. And that comes secondary to consistency.
I love it. All right, Steve, I want to thank you again for being a guest on my show. I can't wait to listen to all those amazing episodes that you have. It's going to be fantastic. To my audience down below, make sure you check out his show. All the links will be in the show notes down below. I thank you again for listening. And please remember always to invest in yourself.